delighted to start today and welcome you all back to the Mobile Money Leadership Forum at MWC Africa 2022. We're really happy to see you all here in person. With the support of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, we have lined up fantastic content for you today, covering key industry topics. From this session on technology and innovation, to consumer safety and resilience in digital finance, and of course, how to continue the impressive growth of the mobile money ecosystem. In the spirit of inclusion, which will permeate through all of our sessions today, I'm really happy to say that we have our partner here, Assist All, who will be signing the session today. So before we dive in, I'd like to take a moment and reflect on some of the figures with you. Mobile money is now transacting $1 trillion annually, with $700 billion of this coming from transactions in sub-Saharan Africa. This is a tremendous figure, and you should all be really proud of it. The GSMA mobile money team certainly is. Nearly half of the 1.35 billion people with a registered mobile money account are in sub-Saharan Africa. In fact, in sub-Saharan Africa, mobile money account ownership was up 12% in just 3 years, with approximately 33% of adults now holding an account. Comparatively, accounts at other financial institutions like banks grew at only 7%. We know that mobile money remains a driving force for financial inclusion in sub-Saharan Africa. In 10 years, the rate of financial inclusion in sub-Saharan Africa has more than doubled, reaching 55%. Sub-Saharan Africa is home to all 11 economies of the world, in which more adults have a mobile money account than a financial institution account. However, there is still much to be done to ensure that we can achieve the full potential of digital finance for all. Today, there are still 1.4 billion people who remain unbanked, and nearly 20%, 290 million people, are in sub-Saharan Africa alone. We believe everyone deserves access to inclusive, safe, and innovative financial products. And the mobile money industry has a huge role to play in this. As we work towards the goal of digital finance for all, we will need to keep a number of things in mind. These 290 million people are likely the hardest to reach, but arguably the most crucial to achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 1 of no poverty. To reach them, we will need to work together, driving enabling policies and regulations that foster growth and use, forming strong partnerships that innovate together and diversify product offering, strengthening the value proposition for users while growing sustainable revenue, ensuring that systems are protecting consumers and that consumers are equipped with the digital skills and financial literacy to build their financial health and not fall victim to fraud and other scams. Across the continent, this will not necessarily look the same. Each country, each region, market is unique, offering unique opportunities, and also offering unique challenges. At GSMA, we commit to ensuring that you have access to thought-provoking and actionable insights. We will share best practices, use cases, and data through our publications and research. We will support you in developing cutting-edge technical products through our inclusive tech lab. We will continue to set the standards for consumer protection with our mobile money certification. And of course, we will continue to advocate for the industry. With that, I want to leave you with 2 key figures to consider throughout the day. First, these 290 million Africans currently financially excluded who deserve access to affordable, reliable, safe, and accessible financial services. Second is the 433 million Africans who have a mobile money account and yet do not use it on a monthly basis. We need to do better. We need to serve this user group with right-fit products and build a stronger value proposition for them to leverage digital financial services to thrive. This segment of customers and potential customers offers a huge opportunity. As we dive into the day and thinking about these numbers, I encourage you to think about how we can work together as an industry to drive not just commercial growth, but also how to impact and drive financial inclusion, ensuring digital finance for all. So with that, I'm really pleased and delighted to introduce my colleague to the stage, Barchan Pors.
Thank you very much, Ashley. And it's a real pleasure and also an honor to be here today, as Ashley also mentioned, because I think it deserves to be mentioned that over the past decade, mobile money has really delivered great value and great achievements to the African continent. Some numbers were already mentioned: over 600 million accounts in sub-Saharan Africa, processing staggering $700 billion per year. And we find mobile money services basically across all corners of the African continent. So it really deserves to be mentioned and also to be acknowledged what value mobile money really has played in the continent over the past decade, providing people with access to financial services that otherwise they would not have had access to. It's become a critical piece of national infrastructures, critical services, and ultimately also really helping people to lift themselves out of poverty. At the same time, however, I would say we also find ourselves at the moment that the mobile money industry is under pressure and is reorienting itself for the next decade. Business models that drove the origin of mobile money based on cash-in, cash-out transactions and peer-to-peer transactions are currently under pressure. New players are entering the market and disrupting the ecosystem, and there's a staggering amount of innovation entering the continent, driven from within and coming from outside. So with all that, if we take that snapshot where we stand today, the question really is, or maybe as a CEO of one of the leading mobile money providers that I recently spoke to, put it to me, with all the accomplishments, is this it? Or if it's not, then really, what is next, right? So the next decade of mobile money may look different. And it will be driven, I am quite convinced myself, by innovations in financial technology. I would say that the next decade of mobile money will be driven by a combination of technologists and entrepreneurs. So really innovations in the tech space that are brought to the industry in a commercially viable manner. And that is, I think, what will drive the future for the coming decade and will also shape the lives of people. But what exactly does this future look like? Can we discern what that next decade on the horizon will look like? And also, what is the role of regulation? Innovation may come first, but regulation can set the enabling environment for that to prosper. So in this session, we're going to discuss some of these topics. And to get that started, I would like to introduce to stage Mathieu Massé, CEO, Open Innovations and Fintech, as well as Executive Committee member at Axion Group. Welcome, Mathieu. Great. Welcome, Mathieu. And I would say welcome to Rwanda, Kigali. You mentioned to me that this is actually your first time in Rwanda.
Yes, it is.
And that was a bit of a surprise because you're certainly not a stranger to the African continent. You've been on the continent for around 20 years.
25 years.
25 years.
Not getting younger.
You've worked literally on all corners of the continent, from Egypt to Senegal, from Kenya to Madagascar, where you're currently based. So maybe to start with, could you tell something about your experience on the African continent, your personal background, and also your experience with Mvola, mobile money service in Madagascar, that you helped found, actually?
Thank you, Bart. So, yes, as a start, I arrived in Africa with the telecom industry. I started in Egypt with the launch of Mobinil, where I was taking care of distribution there, and moved forward to Kenya for the launch of Kensel, who's now Airtel Kenya, moving there to Algeria for Njema, who's now Ooredoo, and ending in Madagascar for we took over Telma, who was a fixed operation there, and then we launched mobile operation. What I saw when I was in the telco industry is that we had a direct impact in the life of the people, meaning that people were not able to communicate, and suddenly everybody get his phone, get a number, can be addressed very easily. And I will say that was the beginning of the e-commerce, when you were able to call someone and to tell him, I need this, and someone was answering instead of going for 10 kilometers or losing 1 hour to go to the shop. So this was the start. We saw telecom moving quite quickly, and we launched electronic vouchers on electronic airtime, and we help people to exchange airtime, and we saw them starting to use it as a currency in some countries. So definitely there was a need there that needed to be fulfilled, but as well a need that needed to be fulfilled properly, because if people are using it as a currency, it needs to be stable. And your airtime, it ends, there's promotion, so suddenly your value can change. So this is I think, what brought different operators to launch mobile money. And this is what we saw in Madagascar, and we launched our mobile money operation in 2010 with basic services. Quite quickly, we have moved and introduced bank to wallet, wallet to bank, and we did a companion card with Visa, and we have launched, since more than 6 years now, nano loans and nano savings. And that has led us today. We got even, after becoming electronic money issuer in 2018, we even got a bank license in 2021. So we are quite proud to say that we are one of the first fintech, I think, in the world to come from electronic money issuer to become a bank.
We'll get to that point for sure. So currently at Axian Group, and I think there will probably be quite a number of people in the in the crowd that are wondering they would really like to know more about Axian Group, because Axian Group is not your typical operator.
Not only.
Coming out of Madagascar, which is also maybe not the place where a lot of the bigger groups are located. So at the same time, Axian Group has done a whole range of interesting acquisitions in Togo, Senegal, recently in Tanzania. So could you tell a little bit more about the Axian Group and what the objectives and the strategy is that the group is trying to pursue?
Yes, thanks. So Axian is not a typical telecom group. We are proudly born in Africa and proudly made in Africa. We are coming from Madagascar. We are coming first from the telco, with Telma in Madagascar, but we have 5 clusters. So we have telecom cluster, financial services, where we are doing phone of phones, like working with Partech, for example, or doing CVC, investing directly in some startups in Africa. We have an energy cluster, where we came from gas station, and now we are doing renewable energy, solar grid, SHS, mini grid, large grid. We even go to hydroelectricity today. We have real estate, and we have open innovation and fintech that I'm leading, that is taking care of creating new innovation for the group, looking for new way to improve the group, big data, and developing our fintech. If we have to resume what we want to do as Axian, is that we want to have impact in the continent. So a lot of people are saying this, how we are doing it. We are going to, the target is to give to any African the same chance in terms of digital life, in terms of financial life, in terms of energy, that anybody else in the world. And if you are born in Kigali, Antananarivo, Dar es Salaam, New York, Rio de Janeiro, Singapore, you should have the same chance than anybody. And this is what is driving our action. This is why we are doing mobile money plus, even becoming bank. This is why we are doing renewable energy. This is why in the telco side, we are doing 5G, fiber, all over the continent.
Mm-hmm. So it's really part of a much wider proposition than telecom and financial services. You go way beyond. Maybe bring it a little bit to the space of mobile money and financial services. One of the trends that we see in the industry is that telecom and financial services companies are splitting off those two branches. So the fintech space is being separated from the telecom component. There's multiple such examples currently out there. You have that structure already in place. Mm-hmm. Could you share more about the thinking behind that strategy and yeah, what you aim to achieve with that structure?
Okay, I think there's two basic things. When you're talking fintech, you have a worldwide competition. You have a global competition. And your competitors, they are not doing fintech as a side business. They are concentrated 100% on it. Mm-hmm. So if you want to succeed on that business, you have to focus 100% on it. Second point is your investment. When you're a telco, you invest 90% of your capex on your network, which is normal because you want to provide high quality of service. When you are fintech, you are spending 90% of your OPEX on IT. So it's a different model. Mm-hmm. And if you want to succeed on this model, you need to have team dedicated, and you have team concentrated on increasing the business. And the last point I could add, it's regulation. You have two different regulators. You have a telecom regulator, and you have a financial regulator. And it's always better to have clear regulatory space than having mixed spaces that can bring confusion.
Mm-hmm. So within Axian Group, on the group level, within the multiple countries where you have mobile money services, you are responsible for the fintech component. Right. In this session, we're trying to explore some of the innovations that will shape the next decade as well. Mm-hmm. So if you look at a horizon of 5 to 10 years from now, what are some of the key tech innovations that really are going to drive your business further?
The first leapfrog that I see for Africa is digital ID. As you all know, in order to do advanced financial services, you need to have a proper KYC. So you need, in order to have a proper KYC, you need to know your customers best than you can. And biometric solutions are now getting affordable. Mm-hmm. There is smartphones that are getting affordable as well in the market. So knowing your customers through biometrics is now possible. And we even launched it in Madagascar in September. Mm-hmm. So today this is a reality. That's the first point. Second point is how can we accelerate the exchange? So we need interoperability within the whole ecosystem. Interoperability between the fintechs themselves, interoperability with the banks, and interoperability with all merchants. So all this ecosystem need to be interoperated at any time. Then if you go out of local and you want to become regional or Pan-African, mm-hmm. then the question of Africa, 54 countries, 41 currency raised. But there is a solution for this. You can use stable crypto to accelerate exchange between the countries. So that's one solution that is there. You can look to create African clearinghouse, like we did for roaming in the telco side. So those are two main things that I think will arrive in the next decade.
Great. So, and within Axian, you're also responsible for actually driving that open innovation agenda. So we can talk about the trends, and there's so many things happening, but we also have to talk as an industry how we actually enable that type of innovation. So what type of models do you have within Axian Group to tap into those innovations and make them become reality? How do you drive that innovation?
I think there's three main things that we are trying to put in the Axian spirit. First thing is be curious, meaning that you are working on a certain field, but you have to heads up and you have to look first what are the other guys on your field are doing all over the world. Because when it's happening in the US, in South America, in Asia, it should happen in Africa as well. And we see it today, for example, in the mobility space. We have Yeco here, which is a kind of Uber. Okay, so you can do things in Africa that are really easy if you're a little bit curious. And second point that I will say is that go to the field. Because when you are doing your service in your office, you imagine that people will use it on a certain way. But when you go in the field, you see that it's a different life that is happening here. And I'm always telling my team, okay, we have 10 people, 100 people thinking about one service, but we're addressing 100 million customers today in our markets. And those guys are much more creative than our 10 people. Yeah. So they will have ideas, they will find ways to develop around your service, things that you can never imagine. So don't stay in your office, go out, go to see in the field what's going on, and you will be very, very surprised that even in some remote areas, there is some usage that you will never imagine. And last thing that is there today as well will be use your data. Big data is there, machine learning is there, algorithms are there. They're just waiting to be used much more properly than they are used today, in order not just to give us indication of the market, but being able to do clustering of our customers, being able to create new services based on those analysis.
Mm-hmm. I really trigger on that because I think that's a big question, how we drive innovation. So you say be curious, go out into the field, use your data, of course, as well. Maybe also in the going out into the field, that is, of course, in market amongst your customers. That's also, I would imagine, with innovators in the industry as well. Third parties that build against your platforms, that can deliver services to your customers, which are also their customers. So how do you drive that type of collaboration? What type of models do you have for that? Is education also an important component to that?
Yes, and if you don't mind, I will start with education, because it's something which is really close to our earth in Action. I was in some panels yesterday, and I heard that women were the less digitalized in Africa. Mm. And this is creating a paradox for our business, because fintechs and money is used primarily by women in Africa. They are the one holding the money for the family safely. And this is it's creating a clear paradox, because if you want to improve your fintech services, but you're not addressing women who are keeping the money, then you have a gap. So we have to create a lot of education program. And I heard there is some initiative, I think it was in Uganda, that were presented yesterday, on people going on training villages to financial, and then bringing the fintech after. Mm-hmm. And I think this is exactly this kind of initiative that we need to push, that we go to the village, we educate women and the youth to the usage of finance, and then to the usage of fintech. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, will be a key success for Africa fintech tomorrow. Second point is on the youth. Youth, we need, and this will be solved, I think, through biometrics. Youth, they can't access financial services in most of the country because they are not 18 years old. Mm-hmm. And they are working maybe since they are 16 or 17, because I see in Madagascar, the girls that won the last hackathon that we organized, they were 16 years old. And they all had master, baccalaureate, plus, and but for 2 years they cannot work, okay, because they don't have the ID. So biometrics should help to solve this, and we should think about providing services to the youth as well. Maybe a little bit limited, but we need to do so. In terms of education as well, we have a lot of education to do at SO level to help SO to improve. We are really mass market oriented as fintechs, because we are coming from the telco, which is really mass market oriented. But we need to look at SO much more. So informal business is representing in most of the country 70, 80, 90% of the real activity. And we need to educate people to do basic accounting, and we need to provide them some basic tool on their smartphones or even on USSD in order for them to follow up their activity. So yes, education is really key for us. In terms of cooperation, I think cash is king today, still. So if we want to live in a cashless society in the next 10 years, we need to do something between cooperation and competition that we call co-petition. And it's just trying to provide our services to all segments of the market. Banks are addressing high value. We are addressing customers that have the chance to have a mobile phone, but we need even to address the others. So this will happen only if everybody cooperates. As Fintech, you have a simple example. In order to provide nano loans or nano savings, if you don't have a bank license, you need to partner with a bank. And this is an example of co-optation because the banks see you as a competitor, but as well we are cooperating together because we're opening a new market for them.
Great. Education, competition, collaboration in the industry. I think it's been great having you here, having you share more about Axian Group. I'm sure lots of people in the audience will continue to follow the advancements of the group. Great to hear your experiences and how you see the trends in fintech for the coming decade, and especially also how you at Axian are driving that innovation within your portfolio. It's been a great pleasure having you here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So to continue on that track of innovations in the fintech space, I'd like to continue the session with a panel discussion amongst three players that are really driving the future of our industry. I'd like to welcome to stage Cédric Négasson, Group Head of Fintech Product and Strategy at MTN from Momo. Julio Carvajal, Global Head of Telecom and Media at Cello. And Vile Sointu, Head of Solutions and Strategy, Mobile Financial Services at Ericsson. Just doing the logistics here on stage. I've nicely warmed up your chair for you, Cédric. Welcome, all of you. Thank you very much for joining me here on stage. We'll continue the discussion to talk about fintech innovations that drive the coming decade and drive finance for all within the mobile money industry. Cédric, I would like to get started with you, if that's all right. As we discussed, mobile money has played such a vital role in putting digital financial services into the hands of millions of people on the African continent. But that question I would like to return to really is then, with all the accomplishments of, let's say, traditional mobile money, is this it? Or what is next? Now, I'm sure, knowing you quite a bit, that for you, this is not it. Right? And at MTN, you're clearly preparing yourselves for that fintech evolution, building a mobile money business fully into a fintech business. So could you share with us a little bit more about the strategic thinking behind it and what your objectives are within MTN and Momo?
Sure. Thanks, Martin. So I think we look at it in 3 dimensions, all right? And what we've done over the past few years is around the first dimension, which is the user ecosystem, what we call the user ecosystem, where you have the consumers, the businesses, and the distribution network. Mm-hmm. And for the past few years, what we've done is based on what we call our wallet business, okay, which is P2P cash out, I mean, the things that we know, growing this first user ecosystem. And if you think about that, this is a platform of itself that enable now a lot of businesses and other services to now be plugged in and drive innovation for all, right? So the second dimension that we are now looking at is what we call the service ecosystem, okay? And that's, to Mathieu's points, a lot of the internal innovation is now going into how do we enable capabilities around lending, payments, e-commerce, insurance, remittance, that will bring more service for the user ecosystem. And we are now, thank you. So we are now building these capabilities and rolling them out across the footprint. And last but not the least, which I'm the most passionate about, to be honest, is the partner ecosystem. And that's where, you know, we have our traditional partner, which are the bank, the financial service provider, but the new partners are now the innovators and the developers. And we launch an open API program, you know, one of the, I guess, only Pan-African and from Africa open API program that enable in a very easy way, you know, any companies that want to leverage our user and service ecosystem, you know, to innovate and provide solutions. And that has been very, very exciting, you know. We just ran a hackathon and 500 new ideas came out of this hackathon. So that was very, very interesting. And these are potential new services that are driving innovation and reaching more people, right? And services that are relevant for more people.
So let's park that, because I'd definitely like to continue on that track, talking open APIs and how we drive innovation in that connected ecosystem. But Julia, welcome as well to stage. I would also like to hear your first perspective, because you work for Cello,
Yes.
an open source and mobile-first blockchain initiative, clearly tailored also to the needs of emerging market context.
Correct.
And I think Cello is also mission-driven. If I'm not mistaken, the word Cello actually means purpose, right?
Correct.
So could you
yeah.
tell a little bit more about the ideation behind Cello and what it aims to achieve?
Yes, so when the Cello founders were designing the Cello protocol, they were asking themselves, what are the features of money that could lead to a better world? What are the, how could we design a financial system that creates the conditions of prosperity for everyone? And how could crypto and Cello contribute to poverty alleviation and the climate crisis as well? So those two things are missions for the Cello protocol. And what they did is they designed an open source blockchain that is focused on making remittances and payments really easy to send at a small fraction of the current cost, so that it enables to send, for example, $3 to a poor community in the middle of Venezuela, Colombia, or Somalia, right? And that would be completely impossible through the current banking rails. And also because half of the population in developing countries is unbanked due to the high costs, but 93% has a mobile phone. They focused on a mobile-first blockchain, a blockchain optimized to work on mobile devices. And therefore, they're a great fit for the telco industry, and why we are also putting this technology in you know, our focus is to enable the work, the fantastic work that telecom operators are doing in this space, so that they can launch more efficient, lower cost, faster, interoperable, cross-border services, and achieve the mission of, you know, a better Africa.
Great, so clearly one of those main technologies coming our way, being there already, actually, I would be tempted to say. So let's definitely explore that connection between blockchain and mobile money in the future of that. But before doing so, I would like to also involve Ville in the discussion, of course, on behalf of Ericsson, where you hold a role in financial services for solutions and strategy. So Ericsson is actually one of the leading technology providers, platforms behind several of the leading mobile money providers in the African continent and beyond. So that puts you in a very special position, of course, to see different experiences from different providers and geographies. So from your perspective, if you look at the mobile money business as it stands today, how do you look at that, and what's the role that Ericsson plays in enabling that?
So it's good to start by saying that we've been part of the mobile money story now for 10 years. In fact, our first live deployment of a mobile money platform by Ericsson was here in Rwanda. We also achieved our first 1 million users here in Rwanda, so it is a very important place for us. Now, during this decade of development of mobile money systems, not only ours, but the ecosystem in general, of course, we've seen a lot of progress. So what started off as a glorified airtime top-up, basically, has now grown into a flourishing financial ecosystem around Africa and other parts of the world as well. And it's a really fascinating story to see this evolution. Now, we are a technology provider. I'm an engineer, so fair warning. That I'm fascinated by the technical development of mobile money platforms, starting from generation 1 platforms with somewhat unreliable availability, and the first generation typically being the experimental one. We moved directly into generation 2, which were basically more resilient, high available API-enabled systems, which enable ecosystem development in a much more efficient way, like Cedric also mentioned, and has a lot of proof points with. Now we're currently seeing the move to generation 3, which is more cloud-based systems with composable microservices architecture and event-driven architecture as well. So we're seeing even more flexibility and versatility in the technology space here with mobile money. So that's also very exciting from a technical standpoint. So I have to get those out of the way. On the other side, of course, we've seen the evolution of use cases. So what started off with airtime top-up, cash in, cash out, peer-to-peer transfers. Now we're seeing the evolution over the past years into savings, lending, pay-as-you-go schemes for utilities, insurance, or even education. So pay-as-you-learn, as we've seen in a few countries. All of this is, of course, making sure that we're moving from basic financial inclusion angles into financial well-being. And our goal, at least, is to allow our customers to help their customers to get into financial enrichment, ultimately. And we're going to get into all the good stuff about data and artificial intelligence and all the things that will enable that enrichment in a very efficient way further down in the conversation. So I'm looking forward to that part. Finally, I want to mention that I'm a recovering banker, so I worked for a bank for 5 years before rejoining Ericsson now this year. And working for a bank in Europe, you see a lot what is going on in the infrastructure, the financial infrastructure in legacy banks. And I have to say that there's a lot that banks can actually learn from the African mobile money market, not only from a technology standpoint, but overall ecosystem development, enabling partnership ecosystems to flourish. And this is something to have a look from, even from a banking perspective, something to learn from this market.
That's very interesting. So you're not only bringing, but you're also extracting knowledge and value from the African continent that you expose to other areas in the world.
Yeah.
So maybe one thing that I would like to explore with you as a panel is on that interaction between all the innovation in the blockchain space and the mobile money industry. So Julia, there's a lot of excitement about cryptocurrency on the global level, on the African continent. A lot of promise also for it to drive financial inclusion in sub-Saharan Africa. But at the same time, it's not always immediately clear how that interconnection between crypto on the one hand and mobile money on the other hand works together, how that would end up in the hands of consumers. So what do you see as your role as a blockchain in the evolution of the industry, and how do you see that interconnectivity taking shape?
I mean, I think that on top of blockchain, you can build very simple applications that are very easy, as easy to use as the current applications developed for the, the financially to be included, right? So that they are very, very simple to use. Let's say the user experience or UX is not really related to the technology underneath powering the application. So I think these are two separate things, right? So I think what what blockchain brings is that layer of interoperability, efficiency, upon which you can build the applications that are, cheaper and better for the demographic that we want to target. And so, and you can make crypto completely transparent to the user. So, when we hear the word crypto, we say, oh, that's super complicated. How are these people going to understand? They don't need to understand. You can, there's services where you're just paying and you're just sending and you don't know what's being used underneath. It's completely oblivious to you. You just have a very easy experience designed for that, right? And there might be other use cases where, yes, you need to educate the user that you are using crypto if they want to actually invest in a coin for whatever reason, or they want to have a stable coin in dollars, because they know that that's going to be kind of a nice place to deposit their money versus the local currency because of the valuation of the local currency or because of these kind of reasons. So that's a different probably segment and education that you need to put in place. But I mean, there's a lot of applications where you don't need to actually explain at all anything related to crypto.
So really a new technology, groundbreaking, very advanced already, that may shape future financial services. If we look at the origin of mobile money as it started out over a decade ago, it was actually built on very basic type of technology at the time, right? 2G networks, USSD channels, and still very heavily in use. But at the same time, we see that the industry, of course, is already evolving towards internet-based propositions, blockchain on the table. So I'm very curious to hear from your perspective, from Erics and Ville, is the current technology that the mobile money industry is built on still fit for purpose? Or if not, or if partially, what are some of those new tech trends that you see we should really keep our eye out for?
So in my previous answer, I outlined different generations of mobile money platforms, and this is actually the same kind of division that as you would see for any core banking system, generation 1, 2, and 3. I would argue that especially with generation 2 systems, it's very easy to continue the business as is, as long as you are API enabled, and this is very important. If you're building your systems as a black box, which enables functionality and you're able to develop everything internally, but unless you expose those over APIs, then you're not able to connect efficiently into the broader ecosystem, and that is important. But with that being said, progress is moving forward, and as I mentioned, we are moving it towards more, even more modularized composable architectures with microservices, cloud availability, and event-driven architectures, which allows us to connect things like Kafka pipelines, for those who understand what that means, into different kinds of event structures that allow real-time functionality in these systems. But we will not, of course, stop there. So these are the kind of infrastructure, boring engineering things that you need to have in place, almost like hygiene factors. But then we move into the things that we have to enhance even further. And this links to the discussion about data, effectively. The favorite saying of all the management consultants in the world is that they say that data is the new oil. I'm not going to say that because especially when you are in the regulated space, you have to understand that using data, private data, if it's financial data, is not the same as using Google or Facebook data, basically. You need to have the privacy controls, and you are bound by regulation in terms of what you can actually do with that data in the first place. So that's why I say, no, it's not the new oil, it's actually your new plutonium, because it can actually really blow up in your hands if you don't know what you're doing with it. So we are careful in enabling our customers to utilize data in a privacy-preserving way with customer consent, making sure that all the customers using our platforms are completely protected when doing that. And while we do these things, we want to achieve a couple of things with AI and machine learning models using those data models. Number one, of course, being a high level of personalization. The ultimate goal of using data and AI in mobile money systems is to really enable almost like your own little private banker to be in everybody's lives. So it is making the banking invisible, making sure that you can rely on that somebody's taking care of your finances, giving you the advice that you need on a personal level. Today, these are services that are offered by individuals on the highly affluent segment. In the future, we will see this moving into more AI-based models, which allows to offer this to almost everybody in the world. These are important elements of the tech stack that we need to make better. Of course, AI and data will be used for further protection of our customers. So we will, of course, detect bad behavior. So for fraud detection, anti-money laundering, all of these things that have to be in place in order to be a regulatory compliant financial service, all of these are becoming more and more efficient in the future as we use the data efficiently and using machine learning models to do that. The third interesting part, which is something that we're looking in the horizon right now, is the fact that financial systems are more efficient when they collaborate together. And one of the great use cases of financial systems, like I mentioned, is fraud detection using machine learning models. But when those models are restricted to single installations of financial system, as they should be, because the data is, again, protected by regulation and privacy laws, what if we could actually use the learnings of those machine learning algorithms and distribute that over several installations effectively, not moving the data itself, but making sure that we have a machine learning algorithm that is able to learn from the pool of data in order to be even more efficient, even more accurate with its predictions. So these privacy-enhancing technologies is a very interesting field of research that we're looking into in the future as well. Finally, more of a broader standpoint into what type of development would we like to see in the future is the collaborative infrastructure build related to things like digital identity and then, of course, interoperability of payments on a national level. These are considered non-competitive infrastructure plays, which would benefit everybody in these economies. Mm-hmm. One of the examples that you hear many times as a successful country in fintech adoption is India, for example. And people always say that it's basically the UPI payment infrastructure and the digital identity that is making that possible. I would like to see something like that happen in more and more countries as well. So collaborative infrastructure being the important thing there.
So that actually triggers a thought. So you mentioned the collaboration, you mentioned APIs and openness of system, sharing data that evidently comes with security concerns and how that can be exposed. It kind of links it back to the discussion that you triggered, Cedric, as well, in terms of your openness and your open API programs that you are driving and you mentioned you're very passionate about. Because feedback that is sometimes heard from third parties, big or small, is that they sometimes struggle to actually connect to mobile money platforms in terms of servers, in terms of technology. I know that you're building a sizable open API program. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you're shaping that up and how you're actually driving that interaction and collaboration with your third parties?
Yeah, thanks, Martin. And I would like to disclose something. The reason why we went into API is because I'm very lazy, and I was receiving a lot of emails, on LinkedIn. We want to integrate there. And I was like, okay, we need something, we need a solution, because I'm tired of having to reply. Mm-hmm. And today, this program, and just to make it clear, right, it's over 150 million API calls per month. There is 23,000 developers registered, and that have tried the sandbox. And this is something that is growing, more than doubling every year, right? So I'm happy to hear this feedback, and I'm happy to say that it's actually effective and you can go right now, and anyone can go right now and just access our API and develop against it, and just need to open a mobile money account to start leveraging our platform.
So is opening that API sufficient, or do you need to provide more than that, tooling, events, advocacy? How do you approach that?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I would say that we work on a lot is education, mm-hmm. All right? Because You know, a payment API or a deposit API, whatever Ville is working on, is a very, I mean, it's complex, you know, and we productify it. And we now have hackathon, we organize digital events with the community and, you know, educate them around new capabilities. And there are new capabilities that are coming that are even more complex. So Ville talk about identity, we have data, you have channel, notification, and if you combine all these things, you can really create very interesting solution, you know, for consumers. So we do a lot of this engagement. I talk about the hackathon, you know. So I think the first thing is, and the most important thing is really in my mind around education and building an ecosystem, you know, of developers, innovators, even working with VC, you know, in some instance to see how we can, you know, all work together and help local business, you know, and local innovator to drive innovation and, you know, deliver relevant service for the consumers.
Mm-hmm. If we combine those two components that have been raised, on the one hand, open API propositions, on the other hand, data and machine learning techniques, mobile operators, mobile money providers sit on a treasure of data. And data being the new oil or the new plutonium, as you put it, Ville, there is a lot of value in there, but it may not always be immediately evident how to monetize on that. So what's your views in terms of what mobile money providers can do to untap the potential of data and bring propositions with commercial value? Maybe that's something I can pose to Ville first.
Oh. There we go. So combining financial data with the contextual data of the user is important. I think it's the collection of multiple sources of data, and then that gives the context of the user, understanding where the user is coming from, what is the life situation of the user, and what might happen next. Now, the financial data provided that mobile money operators, of course, have, is almost like the confirmation of certain activities. So it is the financial data and transactional data on the payment side is referred to as a gold mine because it actually gives a confirmation of how you spent your money, what did you actually buy, instead of just relying on intent. And if you look at social media networks, they don't have the information, what did you actually buy. Now, this almost like a dot on the I or cherry on the cake is really this confirmation that this transaction happened. Now, if this data can be then combined with, again, with the user's consent, with the other contextual data, then we're starting to get into interesting propositions with regards to, for example, different kinds of life situations. So I could, for example, simulate purchase of something based on my life situation, and then we could predict how will that affect your cash flows and your income, basically, based on what we already know. An example is that you could predict, you can simulate a life event. Let's say there's a new child coming to the family, so we can predict that these types of costs will now increase for you, and we can compare that with the historical data of the user, saying that based on this you would need additional income, and then even propose certain solutions for those situations. So it is really this combining the historical data of financial transaction with the contextual and then simulating life events moving forward. That is part of this proposition that I mentioned before, which is your own personal private advisor that you're able to rely on because it is trusted, and that data is only visible to you, and you can trust that it's not being leaked to the social media giants of the world. And again, having that trust element is extremely important when talking about sensitive topics like this.
When it comes to trust, when it comes to innovation, and we discuss artificial intelligence, open API propositions, blockchain, it is my personal firm conviction that it's the technologists and the entrepreneurs that drive the future of financial services on the continent. As I also said in the introduction, but it's very evident as well that regulation plays a key role to guide that, to ensure trust and reliability of the ecosystem, and also to enable innovation to take shape. Julia, working in the blockchain domain, that's a heavily unregulated domain in many jurisdictions at least, right? So what type of issues do you encounter, particularly on the African continent, when it comes to licensing and regulation for your type of work? And what type of message would you like to bring to regulators and policymakers that may be amongst us in the audience?
Yes, sure. So obviously here there's regulation. I mean, if we think, for example, of remittances, right? There's regulation at the sender side and there's regulation at the receiving side. So the largest markets that are senders are the US, Europe, and you could potentially think the Middle East, right? So regulation is in place in the US where you can use crypto with no problem. It's in place in Europe where you can use crypto with no problem. And it's definitely coming to the Middle East with Dubai already, you know, setting the regulation for using blockchain and crypto. And I'm sure that more things are coming to that region. So these are the sender regions. And there, you know, for the cash in, and the benefit of blockchain on remittances, it's in place. Now, on the cash out, which is, for example, with regards to Africa, is mostly a receiving market for those international remittances. What we do is we work with a third party that is a centralized regulated entity that can take that crypto and deliver fiat currencies to the operators such as MTN, Orange, Axiom, or whomever is here, so that they can start benefiting from the low-cost, instantaneous, cross-border remittances in a compliant way from day zero, from tomorrow. You know, we can start doing business from tomorrow, and you can start benefiting from those lower cost, more efficient international remittance transactions. Now, then there is this second opportunity, which is this intra-Africa trade that it's happening with, you know, that will come, I'm sure, because those 55 countries need to get aligned because such an opportunity cannot be missed. And I'm sure that regulators, because of this opportunity, which is massive for this continent, will realize that blockchain has a major role to play there to enable things like, you know, the UPI that was just mentioned in India, you know, this digital, instantaneous cross, in that case, India is one jurisdiction, but if you want to make it cross-border, that's what blockchain can be incredibly useful. And therefore, it's really important that that the regulators get on board with this technology. And there, you can also use third parties, like, you know, the ones that we use, in my case is Ponto, that can also act as this clearinghouse that Matthew from Axiom was mentioning before, with different stable currencies from different markets, and where even CBDCs might be used, right? So if a local regulator decides to go for a CBDC, as many jurisdictions, that can be also be used and leveraged. So it might be some stable coins in some countries, it might be CBDCs in some others, and there can be, you know, and that can enable not only low cost in the transaction, but also low cost in the currency conversion, which is another big driver of cost.
And maybe to you, Cedric, being based on the African continent with a sizable footprint amongst many different countries, with each having their own jurisdictions, what do you think regulators could do to enable a flourishing fintech ecosystem? And how do you work with them?
Yeah, thank you, Bartian. So I think it has been a journey with the regulators. You know, we started without even being regulated, actually, in many countries. And today we have a direct relation. We are regulated. So, and through this journey, I think we partner with regulator, and, you know, it has been a very positive relation. we have regulators now that have even gone as far as enabling sandbox, you know, or regulatory sandbox, right? And I think that's an important concept, you know, because the pace of innovation is that we need to be able also us to experience, you know, together with the regulator to find the right way to shape this innovation for the benefit of the consumers.
Right.
So I think that's a very important concept. The second one is around, and that's a journey we worked on now with the regulator, is around, you know, enabling telcos to evolve their business model, okay? Enabling mobile money to evolve the business model away from, you know, consumer fees, you know, to all these new services around, you know, lending, insurance, and so on, to be able, I mean, for the benefits of the consumer, right? And also to increase the level of transaction. And then the last one is around, you know, partnership in driving education and adoption, right? As we move from, you know, P2P to payments, actually, there is a lot of work that needs to be done around educating consumers and businesses, right, to do this shift. And that's something that we need to work on together with regulator and probably with competitors too, you know, on the infrastructure level. So.
Great. Thank you for sharing all your perspectives. As the lights are switched off, bear with us. In fact, there is a bit of time to pose your questions. I'm sure there's a lot of thoughts triggered around the contributions of our speakers today. So if you'd like to pose anything from the audience, here's your moment. Yes.
Hello. So my question goes to Cedric. My name's Njovo Aston, and I'm product manager ZPay. So ZPay is a fintech, fastest growing fintech in Africa that runs in 23 markets, and we terminate remittances into all these markets. So Cedric, my question is, how are you managing compliance with regards to KYC in the different markets that you're operating in as MTN? And with your open API, how are you making it possible for fintechs in different jurisdictions to be able to terminate transactions, or rather remittances, through one API gateway to all these 18 corridors and jurisdictions that MTN is in?
Okay, thank you for putting me on the spot. So the first thing around KYC compliance, look, I don't think we don't manage, we comply. We have to comply. There is no choice about it, right? What is, you know, the position from which we come from, right, is that we have millions of consumers as a telco business, and we leverage that to, you know, to enable the same consumer with a wallet, okay? And we have to comply with the different regulation as they come in different form in the different markets. Your second question around the single API, so, and you know, leveraging on our KYC, okay? So I'm gonna go back to, and the website is called momodeveloper.mtn.com. You can check it right now. And you will see that there is actually a remittance API, okay? Or it's not a remittance API, it's a combination of two APIs, okay, that are deposit, which enable you to debit your wallet as a business and credit a consumer, and KYC, okay, which enables to check if a consumer is enabled to receive a remittance, yes or no. In our new iteration, we actually are working on enabling what we call KYC as a service, right? Which will, at different levels, okay, enables you, for example, to check if a customer is an adult, okay? Or to check if a customer, or to get the name of a consumer if you want to customize your service in your own environment, okay? And it can go as far as getting the full KYC upon customer consent. Ville, I hope I make you happy with this one. And this, is deployed as one API layer, enabling you to access all our markets, in one go. So yeah, I hope I've addressed your question.
Thank you very much for a great question. There's time for, if we can keep it crisp, a quick final question and answer, if anyone is interested.
Yes. Thank you. My name is Prince Michael, and I'm a tour operator. So, but I'm also a consumer for mobile money and MTN services. So I have two questions. One, you kept on the speaker. The gentleman kept talking about education, financial education, but it kept on coming in my head, and I want to ask all the panelists that what are you doing to teach? Because you also, when you talk of education, you have either schools, you have universities, but you also have people in the villages where you want to build or to extend all those beautiful infrastructures that you're talking about to be able to enable consumers understand how effective mobile money would or other services would work. So I always see there is a gap, and you also need to do a lot to educate, to invest in education, either it's in the universities or in the rural villages or even in town. Some people don't understand how certain services are done, and yet you just, when you invent them, you just market them. It seems like in the cities, but yet more people need to understand what they are. My other question also is, in Africa...
Maybe we can start with the first question, but who would you like to respond to your question?
All the panelists have
All
to,
the panelists.
because they stand for different companies.
Who would like to?
I'll take a shot. So we stand here as a technology provider and making sure that our systems are accessible, trustworthy, and easy to understand. And in my mind, education begins from trusting the entity that is giving the education. So having that trust on the ground is very important. And that's why we're seeing the success of mobile operators like MTN, because those brands, those people are trusted in the communities where they are. So it starts from there, finding the right source for the education. The second part is on the technology side, so making understandable technology so that when it's explained, it's also easy to understand how it will impact your life, how are certain decisions going to affect your finances and your well-being in the future as well, and making sure that these things are easy to understand and visible. Those are the kind of cornerstones of good financial education, at least according to my thinking at the moment.
Yeah, from my side, we work with operators, right? So they are kind of the touch point with the customer, and they have different applications that need different education. But I think it's, it's about building and designing something that is very simple, and also the peer-to-peer education is extremely effective, so there's, this kind of educators, local educators that teach people in the village how to do certain things. And but yeah, from our side, it comes more from the operator side, which are the distribution network.
Great. Thank you, Ville. Thank you, Julia. Thank you for your questions from the audience. To come back to the original question that CEO of a leading mobile money provider raised to me, is this it? After more than a decade of mobile money. I think today we've heard so much about technologies, blockchain, open API propositions, artificial intelligence, all sorts of technologies coming our way, already being put in process. We've also learned that it's about a lot more than technology alone. It's about having the right business structures, the right commercial models behind it. It's about education, about collaboration and partnerships. So I would say that to that question, is this it? Certainly, this is not it. This is the start of a new decade. Many more things to follow, a better decade to come. And I would like to thank very much Ville, Julia, Cedric, as well as Mathieu, for sharing their views on this panel and session today. Thank you.